Hello and welcome to Bear Dash. My name is Emily, and today I am joined for the first time by Jesse Stewart. So, Jesse, do you want to introduce yourself?
So I'm the new beat writer on staff. I'm super excited to kind of get started, and they roped me into this. So let's get it going.
Yeah, we coerced him into doing this. Jesse's a superstar. He really knows his stuff. He's been a fantastic addition to the team, and we're so happy to have him aboard our beat crew for football. You can check out all of the great stuff he's been producing already at dailycal.org. And if this is just the off season, we can only imagine how awesome the content will be come fall ball, which is what, as always, brings us here tonight. As the regular season draws closer, we're once again turning our sights further down the road and seeing what the fall has in store for the Bears, given some recent developments. We're both super thrilled to be here breaking down Cal football with you again. And thank you so much for tuning in. So last time, Shaylin and I were doing the broadcast, and we gave our final thoughts on spring camp, analyzed how some of the pro hopefuls like Jake Curhan and Cameron Bynum did in their NFL Pro Day showings. And today we're going to be speaking a little bit more about them because the draft is just a week away. You can watch all of our previous episodes on our YouTube channel, Dash YouTube, if you want to brush up on that. But first, we're going to be going over some news that broke recently that really nobody wanted to hear at all. One of Cal's standout players and their star defensive lineman, Brett Johnson, was involved in an automobile accident and suffered a broken hip, which is sidelining him for the entire 2021 season. He underwent successful surgery on that hip, which is fantastic news. But regardless, we're wishing Brett a smooth recovery, and we're thinking of his family, and we have, our hearts go out to him in that. So, Jesse, this is never something that you want to hear. It's never something that you want to receive news of as a coach, as a fellow teammate, or as a fan. So, what was your reaction when you first heard the news?
It was pretty devastating. I'm not gonna lie to you. I've heard nothing but good things about Brett, like both on and off the field for about a year and a half now, like before I even enrolled at the school. So it's a really tough thing to hear, and again, like you hope that he's doing well and as well as he can be in this situation, and hopefully he's back and healthy the next year. But the main thing is just trying to make sure he's doing okay and make sure again like his family's all right and all things like that.
Yeah, you're right. I think that also I was proud to see that Coach Wilcox emphasized that as well. That was, he was very adamant about the thing that matters most is that Brett gets healthy and focuses on this injury right now and gets through it and is okay. Like, at the end of the day, there are things that are much bigger than college football, and this is one of those things. Brett said that he feels very supported by his teammates, but I'm sure, I'm sure that he's fully aware of the loss that this is to the team season. I think on the end, this is definitely more impactful on Cal's season as a whole than on Brett's career, even or his trajectory. I really do hope that he is cleared to play for the 2022 season. I'm sure that he'll keep training. I'm sure he'll keep his body right. He has 3 more seasons of eligibility after this, but since his arrival as a true freshman, he has been just a force to be reckoned with on the field. He had 26 tackles and 3.5 tackles, which was his career high in 2019. He had 1.5 sacks, which is also a career high. He had a quarterback hurry and a fumble recovery. He had the most tackles of any defensive lineman on the team last year. And, he was playing with real veterans like Deontay Johnson, and he still put up those numbers. So he's definitely a set piece. And this is I mean, I know you kind of alluded this, but this is just a massive loss to the team and the defense, especially considering how the defense's most shallow position is probably the D line. One thing Shayla and I touched on last time was that the amount of depth to this roster is actually pretty incredible, and on the broader scale, it makes situations like this a little bit less distressing when you consider the fact that there are, across the board, lots of players that are capable of getting the job done in their given position. But unfortunately, the defensive line is not as deep in that regard. Someone did Cal to bolster, and now they're kind of set further back in that pursuit. But like you said, what's most important is that he focuses on his recovery and is hopefully better for next season. But I'm curious how you think, maybe specifically on the defense, how you think that his loss will impact the position that he plays, who maybe is decided to take over. I know we are going to touch on that a lot more coming up, but what are some of your on the ground predictions for next season without Brett Johnson there?
Yeah, so I mean, there's going to be a lot of guys that have to step up, and that's the whole thing with football is you got to be next man up all the time. I know in the spring game we saw a couple guys get a lot of rotations. Two of those guys were Stanley McKenzie and Ricky Correa. They kind of joined forces a little bit, which I'll talk about in a second. But those are two very large individuals. I think they're about 330 pounds each. So there's a lot. There's a lot to move around there. You could look at J.H. Tevis. He's going to be a big force, hopefully coming up. He was a pretty good player last year, and you know, when someone goes down, you got to step up. So I think those three were the guys I saw a lot of in spring ball. J.H. Tevis didn't play as much, but obviously he played a ton last season. And then that's going to impact pretty much everyone on the defense. The linebackers are going to have to start making more plays, start getting off blocks, and it's even going to impact the secondary. So, I mean, really, it's going to be those three. And, the package I was talking about with those two is Stanley McKenzie and Ricky Correa come out in a nickel package, and they have this thing called the elephant package, which is where you get both of those big boys on the same field at the same time. And Coach Wilcox was kind of talking about it, and when he was asked about it, he started smiling like ear to ear because when you're a defensive guy like he is, you just like getting all your athletes on the field at the same time. And when you've got two of them that are 330 pounds about each, so like 700 almost pounds on the field at the same time, it's pretty exciting. So you can probably expect to see a lot more of that than maybe they were planning. Hopefully we get to see that because that was a lot of fun to see in spring ball. But really, it's just going to probably have to be a heavy rotation of whoever's left. And a lot of guys from last year who looked really good, like JH, we're going to have to take that next step to get to Brett Johnson's level.
Yeah, you're right. I think that also even the amount of experience that Brett had is going to be a huge factor in determining, kind of who gets to take that role. And also, like you said, I know that Wilcox is, and actually a lot of the coaching, is luckily very defensively minded. And I think that in that regard, they'll be able to sort of account for this, hopefully lessen the blow in whatever ways that they can. But it's a huge, huge loss, and it's not going to be something that is very easily adjusted to. I think that this is an incredibly unlucky season to have something like this happen, really, because the stakes not only are incredibly high this year for the Bears. In my eyes, this could be the hot take of the night, but in my eyes, and I've said this before, I think that they're poised to make quite a splash in the Pac-12. I think that people will be watching pretty intently because this is a team that has proven themselves capable of feats that many thought were implausible, largely because of a functioning offense that they showed off at sometimes last season. So, at the same time as Cal is kind of reemerging from the hinterlands of conference play, the Pac-12 landscape is really shifting as well, which I do want to touch on more later, the schedule. We're all familiar with the phrase, the offense is a good defense, but this has suddenly become kind of contentious for Cal. This is not something that they're used to dealing with, where it's the defense that needs to pick up the slack and the offense that's overperforming. So I think it's really going to be interesting to see how this shakes out and how this loss gets accounted for. I really think it would be pretty heartbreaking, to finally have a really solid offensive rotation going, to finally have them, buckling down, doing a great job, and then have the defense lack in spots that are critical, where they give up, big plays that they really can't afford otherwise, end up losing games because of that, even though the offense has been at a level that, we haven't been used to in recent years. But, it's exciting that in that regard, they're on the up and up. It's also good to know that there are players, like you mentioned, like J.H. Tevis, a lot of people that can, hopefully step up into these big roles and fill the shoes of the people, not even just, when you have months to prepare for it, like in this case, but when injuries happen throughout the season, which they do. And there are always variables that you really can't, account for in that regard. But I know that it's definitely going to be something that's hard to cope with in a lot of ways. But that kind of does bring us to our next section, which is who's going to fill in these gaps, who is going to be battling out in these different positions that maybe lack some depth, and who do you think is going to come out on top? So I think that maybe the obvious one to start with would be Brett Johnson, but take it away. I'll let you have the first say in that.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, I have it's hard to say who's going to start for Brett Johnson. Like I said, I think those three guys will all be in rotation. Um, right now, it's looking like J.H. Tevis, probably one of the two of Stanley McKenzie or Ricky Correa. And then they're going to use a rotation in that Brett Johnson spot. And they're going to, I mean, it's hard to say they're just going to have to figure it out, but that's the reality. When you lose a guy who's, I mean, he's not like a star level, like you're not going to recognize him all over town. Well, maybe we will, but um,
He's
but I
hard to
mean, you know,
miss too.
yeah, exactly. He's a large man. Um, but you know, when you got guys that are that impactful, you just it's hard to replace them. So I think those three are going. And then another kind of just a little bit different, a different position spot I was looking at during the spring game is the receivers position because there are a lot of guys out there right now who are playing a lot of serious ball. Kind of like an underrated group, I think, a little bit. And I mean, in years past at Cal, I mean, way back when, there's a ton of receivers, but in years past, it's been a little bit thinner at the like high end receiver level. And now all of a sudden, you've got a lot of guys who are making a lot of plays for the Bears. Right now, I think who they rolled out with was Nico Rubinho, Kakoa Crawford, and Trevon Clark. Those guys all didn't play much in the spring game, which is usually a pretty good indication that they might be playing a lot during the fall. But even like the guys behind them played super, super well. I'm talking guys like I'm trying to get his pronunciation right. Tommy Christakos, who's a 6'4", 215-pound wide receiver. He's a freshman who I've heard nothing but good things about. Um, Guys like Jeremiah Hunter, who were slated to make a really big impact last year. He had a shoulder injury, kind of sidelined him for the year, and it was a shortened season anyway. So, you know, in a sense, that's the best year to sit out if you have to sit out one, which, you know, hopefully he doesn't have to sit out anymore. Um, so there's a lot of guys out there that are making a lot of plays. Even some of the backups look like way down the depth chart. Guys like Ben Skinner came out and like made splashes like all game. So it should be a really competitive group kind of all the way through, which is again something that if the defense is going to end up having some holes, we're going to have to get in some track meets, or they're going to have to get in some track meets. And you know, when you get in track meets, you want some guys on your team that can go make plays. And so far, it looks like they have about 5 or 6 guys that can just go up and get the ball and make something happen. So it should be really exciting to watch.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's a position that Shaylin and Jasper and I have all talked about before, and how, we're pretty, it could go any way. It could go, there's a lot of talent at that position group, which is a fantastic problem to have if you're a coach. It's like, definitely an okay thing to be struggling with, who you're going to start. Even like with the transfer of Makai Polk, who was a wide receiver, like that really indicates that there is a lot, depth there and a lot of talent there that is still remaining, even though he has transferred. Like I think that the competition there at that specific spot is very high. As far as the defensive line goes in regards to Brett Johnson, I can only just echo what you said, that whoever replaces him really needs to be able to hold off blockers, use their strength, keep running backs from getting the outside tackle box, and just be very versatile and dynamic enough to stop the run, and just be that force that Johnson was. Brett was evidently very, very good at that, based on his 46 career tackles. He had 3 sacks. So whoever starts in his place instead of him really needs to have the solid fundamentals, an ability to really read the field well. A lot of it depends on size and strength, which, as you have touched on a little bit, that's not a huge problem for the Bears, luckily, but pretty much any of the potential starters will now lack experience, which is one of those intangibles that you can't teach, no matter how much a coach maybe wants to bestow that on a player. It's something that you can only learn by being in a game. So for me, I see someone like Akili Calhoun, who's a true freshman, maybe taking the spot, which would be kind of a big shakeup, but we've already talked about how thin that position is already. He's a two-way lineman, which speaks to, I think, his fundamentals being pretty solid. Indicates versatility to me, which I think, is a good sign to be able to adjust to, multiple positions while retaining those basic skills. Obviously, he's, unproven to this point on the collegiate field, but I think that there's potential. I think that one area in the spring game, like you kind of talked about already, is just one area that was lacking, although it was a really good game overall and one that was really impressive for a lot of players and did show off the depth. I think that one area was blocking the run, and really the defense was lacking in that regard. So I think the spring game is also special because it's like a pretty solid indication, since a lot of starters aren't in there, it's a pretty solid indication of what you really need to work on in that specific position. So I think whoever gets Johnson's spot really needs to be able to perform in that regard specifically. I mean, one of the reasons why they beat Oregon last year was because they stuffed the run like a turkey on Thanksgiving. Except for like a couple plays, a couple drives, they really limited them in that capacity while executing, long and strong drives on their own. So I think that there is a lot of weight on that position specifically. So I think you're right. Everything that you said, it's just going to be I think the rotation will also be key. But I'm also curious. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, but since you're the new kid on the blog, we've talked about this in some episodes past. As far as second string quarterback goes, do you have any predictions, any feelings? Because I know that this is one position that Jasper and I had some conversation and debate on, at least. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, well, from my understanding, it's a little bit of a 2A, 2B situation at the backup quarterback position. Right now, Chase Garbers is the starter. Right now, we'll see. And then right behind him is Zach Johnson. Zach Johnson took the majority of the reps during the spring game, and he looked really, really comfortable out there. I know that Bill Musgrave has spoken really highly of him in the past. He's a guy who's got a big arm. He can run. He's really got everything you're looking for in a quarterback. So, I mean, it'll be exciting to see how he develops and like what his role on the team looks like going forward. And then right behind him is Robbie Rowell, junior quarterback. He's been with the team just about as almost as long as Garbers. And so when you talk about like understanding the offense, like he's had a lot of experience in the offense. So it'll be pretty exciting to see how those two shake out. Trying to be as unbiased as possible here.
Independent journalists.
Independent journalists. So I mean, it's really exciting to watch quarterbacks duel it out, especially when you get an opportunity to see them in a spring game where they're really trying to compete. Because I mean, you only see one quarterback in a game if everything goes well. But things start going wrong, you start seeing a lot of quarterbacks. So the less of them you see, the better. But when you get an opportunity to see them all kind of get in there and duel it out, it kind of becomes clear like where the coaching staff is leaning just by who's taking what kind of reps. Who's in there when they run the ball more, who's in there when they throw the ball deep, who's throwing the ball more in general, who's check down Charlie and who's Brett Favre, right? So it's really interesting to see kind of like how that battles out. But right now, obviously Chase is going to be the guy, and then I think it looks like Zach Johnson might be taking the majority of the number 2 reps kind of going forward.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of positions, interestingly enough, that kind of have that, the young and the old sort of veteran and the fresher faces battle kind of going on. Like one position that comes to mind is running backs. And I've kind of thought about in a sort of broader kind of meta sense, like if Brett Johnson's absence on the defense will affect any sort of offensive, schemes, which I think in the sense of like a good offense is a good defense, I think, yes, his absence will definitely affect it in that way. But in the sense of starters, I was sort of thinking like, are they going to swap anyone out now that they know that the defense may not be as strong in some areas? Who's going to start at running back? I mean, I know this doesn't necessarily relate directly, but who's going to battle it out there between all of the talent that they have there, knowing what they know about the players that are going to be taking the field after every offensive drive. So I wonder if it has any effect, if at all. I think there really is only one way to see it play out, but that is the fun of fall football. And I think the Bears certainly have a very interesting schedule ahead of them. I think it's going to be one that is tough and definitely test them time and time again. But regardless, we're just going to have to tune in and see how everything shakes out. And we will be there giving you all of the content So be sure to stay tuned and keep watching Bear Dash all throughout the season. Quick plug over now. So I think we're going to switch gears a little bit. We've got our, one of the most exciting things to me about the spring is the NFL draft. We've been talking about it for a long time, I think because, in the same reason that it's exciting that Cal has a lot of depth right now, Cal also has a lot of talent coming out of it. That's really, we saw 2 DBs get taken last year in the draft. We got a couple players, actually 5 players that have declared that are hopeful, trying to get in. And there are a few like Cameron Bynum and Jay Curhan that we talked about a lot on this show that are expected to go relatively early in the draft. So we're going to be getting Jesse's first takes on this. I know everyone's pretty sick and tired of me talking about the NFL draft too early predictions, but I certainly have quite a bit to say about him. So why don't you get us started? Let me know where you think Cam Bynum is going to end up, how you think he did at Pro Day. How do you think it's going to shake out for him come next week?
Yeah, well, I think people might be a little sick of my draft content too at this point. If you follow me on Twitter, you understand, so I apologize.
I have you muted
Cam
him.
Bynum.
Just kidding.
That's okay. You don't have to say just kidding.
Trust me, don't worry.
So Cam Bynum is super productive at Cal. I mean, he was #1 corner for probably every game he started even as a true freshman. I don't think there was a guy out there who was better than him. And I mean, to say that as a guy who started a lot of games, I don't remember the exact number, I could find it, but when you can start a lot of games and be the best DB out there pretty much exclusively, or at least the best corner, right? Because you had 2 guys taken last year, pretty decent. And then when you can start all those games at a really competitive position like that and be like one of the dudes out there, I mean, that's impressive. And you just got to like take your hat off to that. He did pretty well at Pro Day. I mean, he looked fluid. He ran about, I think he was like a 5 or 4.5. I hope it doesn't start with a 5. That would be bad. So he ran in the 4.5s, which is a really, really good time for him. Because it doesn't always flash when you watch tape, but I mean, he's super instinctual, and that's what you're looking for in the NFL. I've talked to a couple of people, and they say the only concern they have with Cam Bynum at the next level is that he is not a super athlete, and he can't play inside. He can't play that nickel or dime DB role, and they tried him at safety a little bit in the Senior Bowl, and it was kind of hit or miss because it's just a whole different ball game once you get inside the box versus when you're out wide. So a little bit of a lack of versatility, at least at the next level, is going to hurt his stock a little bit. But I mean, there's no reason he can't be like a late day 2, like a 3rd round guy, or like an early to mid, day 3 guy. So like, I'm looking at like rounds 3, 4, 5, hopefully 6 at the lowest, because I mean that guy's a ball player, like through and through.
Yeah, I agree. I have him landing just right about where you said. I'm thinking 4 or 5. As far as teams go, I've had, some debates that have landed him on the New York Jets, which I think would be really fun to see him get to play with the former Cal player Ashton Davis. So the infrastructure is there. I think that's one of another sort of important thing in regards to the draft. Like, my mind all the time when I'm looking at these players. Of course, I'm not getting drafted. I'm unsure that this is how things work in real life. But I do think that having connections in places like that, can only serve to help you. I know that it's not a direct pipeline to a team if you, have an alum that plays there that was drafted. I know it's not, direct correlation, but I do think that just having, maybe just the awareness, look out for Bynum, kind of Davis maybe chirping in the ears of some of those scouts might be really helpful for him. So I can see him at the Jets. I've actually been saying this since the very beginning of these 2 early draft predictions. I can definitely see him going to Dallas. I think that if the Cowboys get Patrick Surtain early on, that they could tack Bynum on for just some extra, oomph at that position. I think that wherever he gets drafted, he's going to be taken for depth in that sense. Like you said, he's a ball player. But I think that he will mostly serve to sort of back up the existing, players and playmakers that are there, maybe come into his own in a year or two. I think that the Cowboys could be a good fit for him, but like you said, versatility is sort of becoming the name of the game in the NFL, and for these, draft hopefuls, Jake Curhan is another former Bear declared for the draft. He transitioned from offensive guard, or he is transitioning into that. He did that during the Senior Bowl. He played right tackle for all of his career at Cal. So I think that it's just advantageous to become more diverse and more flexible, which is not something that every position has the ability to do easily. I think for something like, a lineman, it's a little bit easier. But I still think that it is kind of just becoming more of a requirement to be able to play just about anywhere and in the specific, niches that you're needed in. NFL teams really don't stock up on linemen quite as much. So I think that Curhan kind of knows this going into the draft. You kind of have to be the jack of all trades or really, really good at what you do. So as far as Curhan goes, like I said earlier, just given the existing infrastructure, I could see him going maybe to the Dolphins, really because they just need sort of a boost on the O-line. Also, Cal connections, Gerald Alexander, Patrick Laird. I think that Curhan is very consistent. He's started 39 times across 3 seasons. So he has really taken he's got a lot of on the field, on the ground experience that is extremely valuable. But I would love to hear where you think he might end up.
Yeah. So I mean, like you said, he's got a lot of experience, and kicking inside the guard, I think, is a really good move for him. Because, like you said, if you can play multiple positions in the NFL, you can at least stick somewhere as a backup to at least get your start, get your footing in the NFL. Right now, where I'm kind of looking is, you want to talk about teams that need O-line play. The Raiders desperately need O-line play. They just released, I think, 3 starters, maybe even 4 starters from that offensive line. So, I mean, if you're going to go somewhere and he has a chance to be a priority free agent out of the draft, I don't know if the team's going to draft him or not, but he's kind of sitting in that range where he might even be better off being able to choose where he signs, choose a really good landing spot for him. So I think the Raiders are definitely a spot where he could try and make a splash. Interestingly enough, I think Dallas is a spot where he can make a splash because they have a really set front group, but behind that is a little bit shaky at times. I know they were kind of looking for offensive line, I think. I mean, I'm out of the war room. I don't know, but not yet. So there kind of could be a spot there for him. And really, again, if you're a priority free agent, you can kind of hop around and see what's available and see what's there. Seattle is also another really good spot for him, which is actually a spot that I think that Cam Bynum can end up in. They run a really similar scheme to what I think he would excel in. Just like a 3-high look. We're just going to let you go be a ball player out there. So I think that could be a really fun landing spot for both of them if they do end up there. I think that'd be pretty cool. So that's my kind of Jake Curran assessment, is that I think that he needs to, if he can, find a spot where he can just get his foot in the door and try and stick it out and be just that versatile lineman that you see just kind of play in and play out.
Exactly. And that's exactly what he was for Cal. I think that was, an incredibly valuable asset that he brought to the team. Same with Deontay Johnson. I think you're right that maybe undrafted free agency could be the way to go. I also don't think that, not getting drafted, like you said, is anything to be disheartened about, especially when you have as much talent as these guys do. There are definitely teams and programs that need depth in these spots and that really need leaders like them to come in that are consistent, that have experience, like you said, day in and day out, really know what the grind is like, and I think that will only stand to benefit their program. So I think it'll be really fun to see how the draft turns out. Definitely excited for that. That's unfortunately all the time that we have for today, but thank you so much for tuning in. Catch us in 2 weeks on Tuesday, 8 p.m., which is when we do this broadcast for our next episode of Fair Dash. You can read all of our content and rewatch this episode on dailycal.org. Follow us on Twitter at dailycalsports, and of course, follow Dash Sports on Instagram and Twitter. Be sure to catch some other shows. They're really great. be in the know on Pac-12 football before the season even starts. So, in the good words of our friend Justice De Los Santos, stay hydrated and have a great night. And thank you for watching.